The middle bedroom is happened in 1918. It's set in Ireland and tells the story of a family who move into an old house that is believed to be haunted by the ghost of its previous tenant, an old recluse nicknamed the Spider. Are all living creatures represented in the human race, so that we find shark men, or, at least, men with the instincts of sharks, sloth men, cat men, tiger men, and so on. Le Brun started the idea, I believe, and I take it up as bearing on the case of Sir Michael Carey, of Carey House, near Innistown, on the west coast of Ireland. I would ask another question before starting on my story. If a man were to give way to his natural instincts and retire from the world, would he develop, or, rather, degenerate, along the line of his main instinct? Who can say? I only know that Sir Michael, the builder of the house that took his name, was known 100 years ago amongst the illiterate peasantry as the Spider, that's so dubbed on account of his mentality and general makeup. He lived alone in his house like a spider in a gloomy corner, that, according to legend, the devil came and took him one dark night, leaving neither rag nor bone of him, and that his ghost was reputed to haunt Carey House and the country round, ever after. The next of kin, Mr. Massey Pope, tried to live in the house. He left suddenly on account of the loneliness of the situation and succeeded in letting the place, with the shooting and fishing rights, to a hard-headed Englishman named Doubleday. Doubleday didn't believe in ghosts nor care about them. Snipe was his game. He was a two-bottle man. It was in 1863, and if he had met with a ghost any time after 10 o'clock he would scarcely have seen it, or seeing it, would not have cared. But his servants were the trouble. They left one day in a body, being soft-headed folk and unfortified and having a very good reason of their own. Then some years elapsed and the story of the next let, as told to me by Mickey Phelan one day, out shooting, was as follows. When Mr. Doubleday had gone, saw the house laid empty, still in the country for miles round. Not a man would go into the grounds to trap a rabbit nor a woman enter its doors to lift a window, and Mr. Pope squanderin' his money to advertise it. That's the man he was. He wouldn't be bet by it. Rollin' in riches, what did it matter to him whether it lay let or empty? Not a brass farthing. But lie wouldn't be bet by it. It was like a horse that wouldn't rise at a ditch and he'd canther it back and try it again and lather it over the head, squanderin' his money in the advertising till all of a sudden he got a rise out of a family by name of Leftwich. Dublin people they were, with a grocer's shop in Old Fishamble Street. There was a dozen of them, mostly childer and one red-headed strip of a girl to do the cookin'. £20 a year was the rent, I've heard tell, and they lived mostly be trappin' rabbits, the boys doin' a bit of fishin' and the groceries comin' from the shop where the old father stuck at work in his shin sleeves while the rest of the lot was airing themselves in the country. Be jabers, they were a crowd, ghosts. Little they cared about ghost shambling about without shoes or stockings, and the boys with their sticks and catapults killin' hens be the sly and maltreatin' the country boys like red Injuns, the shame of the county. Nora Driscoll was the name of the red-headed slip, and many a time me mother has seen her with her apron over her head rockin' and cryin' with the treatment of them boys and the botheration of the rest of them, for there was a matter of a dozen or more, rangin' like the pipes of an organ from Mickey the eldest son 6 foot and as thin as a gas pipe, to Pat the youngest not the height of your knee. Well, saw. The ghost lay azy at the sight of the lot of them and didn't let a word out of it for a full month. Then one day, Nora Driscoll was goin' along the top floor passage when the band began to play. The bedrooms was mostly on that passage and the house agent had warned 'em against havin' anything to do with the middlemost bedroom, for, says he, there's rats there that can't be got rid of and that's the cause of all the trouble in the lettin' of the house, says he. It would be 120 a year rent, only for them rats, says he. So they're worth 100 a year to you if you just keep the door shut and don't bother about the noises they do be mackin' at odd times. Sometimes it's like as if they was sneezin' and blowin' their noses, and sometimes it's like as if they was walkin' about with their brogues on, and sometimes it's like as if they was cursin' and swearin'. Don't you mind them, he says, but keep sayin' over and over to yourself they're worth 100 a year to me. That's what he told Mrs. Leftwich. Well, saw, Nora was moonin' along the passage, sent to fetch a duster or somethin' when she opened the door of the middle bedroom by mistake. There was no furniture in it, not as much as a 3-legged stool, and the blind was down, but a shaft of the sun struck through by the side of the blind, and there in the middle of the lure was sittin' a little old man dressed as they was dressed 100 years ago in an old brown coat with brass buttons and all, and the face of him wider his hat topped the sight of him, for Nora said it wasn't a face, but more like one of those masks the childer make out of a bit of paper with holes in it. The screech she let out of her as she banged the door to, brought the family runnin' from downstairs, and the boys slammed open the door to get at the chap, but there wasn't a speck of him. It's a rat she saw, says Mrs. Leftwich. Downstairs with the lot of you, or I'll give you the length of me slipper, and open that door again if you dare. Down they went, Nora bawlin' and the old woman pushin' her, and nothing more happened that day till the night. Half a dozen of the little ones slept in the same room with their mother to save the light and be under control and gettin' on for 12 o'clock. The old woman, snoring with her mouth wide, was woke from her sleep by one of the childer. Mummy, says he, listen to the bagpipes. She lifted herself on her elbow, but, faith, She could have heard it with her head under the clothes, for the drone of the pipes filled the house coming from the middle bedroom. Next minute the whole lither of them was in the passage, the old woman with a Guthern candle in her hand, and as they stood there keeping time with their teeth to the tune of the pipes, the noise of it suddenly let off and the handle of the middle bedroom door began to turn. They didn't wait to see what was coming out. No, Your Honor, you may bet your life they didn't. They was half of them under their beds the length of that night, and next morning they began to pack to go back to Dublin, getting their old traps together and stripping the garden to take back with them in hampers. Mickey, the second boy, was sent running to hire 2 cars to take them to the station, for the railway in those days had just come to Dropboyne, 12 miles away, and whilst he was gone they tore up the potatoes and cut the cabbages, and faith they'd have taken the flurin away if they'd had mains to shift it. Well, there they were strapped and ready to go when Mrs. Leftwich, sitting in her bonnet on the boxes and atting a sandwich, suddenly stops her chewing and looks about her like a hen counting her chickens. "Where's Pat?" says she. Pat was the youngest, as I've told you. Saw, a bit of a chap in petticoats, no size at all and always getting astray. "I don't know," says one of the boys, "but faith, I hear him shouting somewhere upstairs." Upstairs they all rushed, led by the woman, and they hadn't no sooner reached the top passage than they seen Pat being whisked through the open door of the middle bedroom, dragged along by somebody's hand, and when they reached the door, there was Pat being dragged up the chimney. It was one of them big old chimneys a man could go up, and the heels of the child was disappearing when Mrs. Leftwich lays hold of a foot and pulls, all in murder Irish, till the thing in the chimney let go its holt and Pat comes into the grate, kicking like a pup in the shrangles and lifting the roof off with the hullabaloo of him. She tuck him by 1 foot like a turkey and down she runs with him and into the garden, and there when they'd soothed him he gives his story, how he'd been playing in the passage when a little old man, the funniest old man he'd ever seen, pokes his head out of the bedroom door. Pat, poor divil, being sated at his play, couldn't get his legs under him with the fright. He could only sit and shout whilst the head of the little old man pops in and out of the doorway like the head of a tortoise from its shell. Then out he comes the whole of him and grabs the child by the hand and whisks him off into the bedroom and goes up the chimney heels and first hauling Pat after him. Goes up like a spider. Well, they were sitting about on the boxes they'd hauled out of the house waiting for the cars and trying to squeeze more of the news out of Pat, when up comes the cars with Sergeant Rafferty and Constable O'Halloran on one of them, to see they weren't tacking the house away with them. They'd got the bad name in the county. And when the sergeant heard the story, up he went to the bedroom and down he comes again. "Here," says he to O'Halloran, "take this lot off to the train and go to the barracks and fetch me 2 carbines with buckshot cartridges, the same old Forster used to shoot the boys with, bad luck to him. And look slippy," says he, "for I'm a brave man, but I don't want to be no longer here by myself than's needful." Off the cars went with the family packed like flies on a moon. In a matter of a couple of hours back comes the constable with the guns. Up they go to the bedroom. "Stick your head up the chimney," says the sergeant. "I'll be, ifter," says the other. "Well, then, shut it," says the sergeant, backquote, and keep still. They listened but they didn't hear nothing at all. Then the sergeant begins talking in a loud voice, winking at the other. "There's nothing there," says he. "It was a ghost they saw and it's getting uneasy I am myself. Let's get off back to Drumboyne and have a glass and leave the old house to look after itself." "I'm with you," says the constable, and downstairs they tramped, making as much noise with the big boots as a regiment of soldiers. Then in the hall they sits down and begins tacking off the boots. "All the same," says the constable as he pulled the laces, "I'd be just as aisy in me mind if I was 3 miles off trampin' on the road to Drumboyne." "So would I," says the sergeant, "and it's there I'd be, only I'm thinking of promotion." "I'm thinking of ghosts," says the constable with the boot lace in his hand. Backquote, "Go on unlacing your boots," says the other, "and don't be a coward, this is no ghost. Ghosts can't pull childer up chimneys." "Faith, you seem to know a lot about them," says the constable, "but it's either I'm thinking it's holy water and Father Mooney ought to be on this job instead of you and me and guns." "And how would you get holy water up the chimney?" axes the sergeant. "Wit a squirt," replies him, "and how else?" "Squirt yourself out of them boots," says the sergeant, "or it's me Ramrod'll take to you, and now follow me," he says, and walks off. With the loaded guns in their hands up they witmackin' no more sound than shadders in a wall, and when they got to the room down they squats one on each side of the chimney. They hears nothing for a while, but the ticked-in of the sergeant's watch and the sounds of their own hearts goin' lub-a-dub. Then comes a cough. It wasn't a right sort of cough, for, let alone that it was comin' down a chimney, it sounded to be the cough of a chap that had died for want of water and lain in a brick kiln after. The constable said next day he'd have been up and off, only the sound cut the legs from under him. The sergeant wasn't much better, and there they sat sayin' their prayers and listening for more. They waited near an hour hearing nothin', and then all at once began a noise, a scratchin' and a scrabbling like a cat comin' down a drain pipe. "It's comin' down," shouts the constable. Backquote, "Begob it's not," says the sergeant, and with that he shoves the muzzle of his gun up the flue and fires. He fired from fright to keep it up, so he said at the inquest, but, lie jabers, he brought it down like pheasant. tumbling and clawing, and when they stretched it out on the floor it was a man right enough. A bit of an old man as brown as a spider, and there he lay dead as a grouse with the buckshot holes in him and not a drop of blood, no more than if he'd been made of cardboard. Cover the face of him, says the constable, for that was the sort of face he had, better than I can tell you, and having nothing to cover it they turned him face down, and made off running to Drumboyne for the resident magistrate. Well, sir, when they took that chimney down they found a room off it, all littered with bones and birds' feathers and rats' tails. It wouldn't do to be telling you of that room, more than it had no window to it and had been built on purpose by Sir Michael Carey when he put the house up. He took to live in it, for that was the way his heart was, and at long last he took to live nowhere else, and that was how the sergeant brought him down, and he must have been a matter of 110 years of age, they reckoned. He had his bagpipes to cheer him and frighten away tenants, and he'd be out be nights scavenging for food. They say they found the bones of childer in the room, but maybe that was a lie got be him trying to drag Pat Leftwich up the flue, but faith I wouldn't put it beyond him. For that chap was a spider, sir, they said his face was the face of a spider, and his arms and legs no better. He'd begun in the shape of a man, maybe, but the spider in him got the better of him. Look, there's all that's left of the house, sir, thin walls beyond the trees. They set a light to it to get shut of that room, and if you knew the truth of it all you wouldn't blame them.